The Catholic Church is getting closer to electing a new pope. Cardinals from around the world are making their way to the Vatican for the secretive process known as the conclave. Voting is expected to begin tomorrow night, Rome time. And here to talk to us about the process, the issues that are at play, and who the key players are is Brian Taberski, an assistant clinical professor of Theology and Religious Studies at Seattle University. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So how does a conclave work?
It's an interesting process because I think part of the intrigue in it is very much so rooted in this kind of more political-minded idea and whatnot. And there is a legislative text about what to do, but there's also a liturgical text, a prayer text, that the cardinals are in prayer as much as they are kind of in process of selecting who the next pope will be. So tomorrow evening, we'll see them process into the Sistine Chapel in a very kind of prayerful way. They'll take the oath to enter into the conclave. The doors will be closed. People will be told, ex homines, get out. It sounds nicer in Latin than it does kind of in vernacular English. And they'll begin a process of, in prayer, quietly voting twice in the morning, twice in the afternoon. The first night, they may have a vote, they may not. But while they're in the Sistine Chapel, there's no talking. They're literally just praying, writing down names, going up and saying, I call upon God, my judge, that this is the person I think should be the next Supreme Pontiff, and they put their ballot in an urn and cover it and then go and sit down, and people it's quiet, it's prayerful.
Wow.
And so it's not necessarily a raucous parliamentary moment, kind of on a legislative floor, shall we say.
Yeah, and you said no distractions, no talking, so no phones, no internet,
No phones, no internet, no newspapers, no television. When they enter into conclave tomorrow evening, they're going to live in a pretty closed circuit. They're going to go from the Casa Santa Marta, which is where Pope Francis had been living, which is where they're all staying. It was built by Pope John Paul II to actually kind of be a guest house for the Vatican. And they'll be ushered then to where the Sistine Chapel is. Across from the Sistine Chapel is the Chapel of St. Paul, where they'll begin their prayer. And then they'll again go into the Sistine Chapel. And once they're in there, it's just they write down the name of who they think the next Pope should be and put it in and rinse and repeat.
Yeah, and I want to talk about some of the front runners, so explain.
Front runners is an interesting term, right? Because front runner would almost presuppose there's a running happening and just who's in front, when in reality what we're calling front runners would be what the Italians called the papabili, which is really people saying, we kind of have a sense of what the next pope age-wise, all of these kind of dynamics should be, and here are just some names. Here are some names that fit that bill. But of course, just because it fits the bill doesn't mean that's what the Holy Spirit in the moment is going to invite the cardinals to consider. And so there are some, which you want to always pay attention to is the Italian newspapers and who they're talking about.
Okay, and the names there.
Because they've got their ear to the drum. And so recently, and somewhat surprisingly, Cardinal Gretsch of Malta has come up. Cardinal Pizzaballa from Jerusalem has come up. Cardinal Robert Prevost, who's now in the Vatican but originally a Chicagoan, Chicago native, has come up. But that doesn't mean anything. That just means it's who the press is talking about.
Definitely. And what are some big issues that you think could influence the vote?
Well, I think there's a lot happening in the world. I think as anyone knows who watches King 5, things are busy these days.
Yes.
And while the Pope is certainly the leader of the Roman Catholic Church, he also is an influencer in the greater world stage. So what's happening in the world, what's happening in the church, and not just what's happening perhaps in a particular area of the church, but really the church universal, right? That these last few days, the cardinals have been in something called the General Congregation, and what they've been getting is reports about what's going on. What concerns the church in the United States isn't necessarily what's concerning the church on the African continent, or what's happening to Christians in South America isn't what's happening to Christians in Myanmar. And a lot of these cardinals don't necessarily have the whole story. So what they're doing is listening and getting a sense of what's happening in this global church, and then starting to pay attention to who among us might be the right person for this moment.
Absolutely. And this has got to be Such an exciting time for you.
Well, it's certainly interesting, right? I'm a student of history, so when I'm living through history, it's not lost on me. But as exciting as it is, I also think it's encouraging. I think it's encouraging that people are interested.
Yes.
I just met somebody backstage who was like, I'm not even Catholic, but I'm fascinated by this. And I think that for me at least, as a good Catholic boy from upstate New York, what that says to me is that the church still matters, that the church is still relevant, that there's something about the church that does still capture people's imagination. And so maybe we're not necessarily as forlorn as some might want to think we are at times.
Thank you so much for being here and sharing all this information. We really appreciate it.